I want you to admit there's nothing wrong with the street. You're not going to hold us hostage here with these yellow lights and all these big trucks.
Michael Douglas is an unemployed defense worker who goes berserk during a long, hot day in Los Angeles in Falling Down, one of the new movies we'll review this week on Siskel and Ebert. And we'll also take a look at the Academy Award nominations announced earlier this week, talking about the choices we like, the choices we don't like, and the choices that are missing. I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times.
And I'm Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune, and our first film is called Falling Down, with Michael Douglas as a fed-up, middle-class white guy ticked off at foreigners running convenience stores, minority gang members wielding knives, rip-offs by fast food restaurants and L.A. freeway traffic, and his wife hates him, and he's having a bad hair day, too. So what's the movie about? Just one scene after another of Douglas getting angry, very angry, like at this Korean store owner and his high prices.
Donuts. Package of 6, how much?
$1.12.
Oh! Too much.
And then he wants breakfast at a fast food restaurant that stops serving at 11:30. Now, this is not one of life's big problems, but it is in this movie a scene that plays in poor taste, considering the number of mass killings recently in fast food outlets.
I don't want lunch. I want breakfast.
Yeah, well, hey, I'm really sorry.
Yeah. Well, hey, I'm really sorry, too.
The best part of the movie, and it isn't explored enough, is Douglas's busted relationship with his wife, nicely played by Barbara Hershey. They're divorced, and he's bitter at losing her, and also his daughter.
You gotta stop calling me.
It's Adele's birthday.
Yes, I know it's her birthday. What do you want?
Out to catch Douglas before he really hurts anybody is veteran cop Robert Duvall on, get this, old movie chestnut, his last day before retiring.
I know who this guy is.
Who is he?
He had this personalized license plate. What the hell was it? It was weird. It said, defense.
Now, every decade or so, we get one of these Revenge of the Middle Class pictures. Joe with Peter Boyle was a similar and much better film in 1970, and Hardcore with George C. Scott was another picture, also better. The subject is legitimate, of course, but Falling Down is more about exploitation scenes of Douglas blowing up than any serious investigation of Michael Douglas's psyche. Its script needed another run through the typewriter.
I liked it better than you did, Gene, and I think one element of the picture that you haven't really gotten into is that the movie is really about two middle-class, middle-aged white guys who both feel that their lives have basically been thrown away and were pointless. And one of them is Douglas, and the other one is Duvall, who has not been satisfied in his career as a cop. And their lives are on intersecting paths during this day. And when they meet out there on that pier, it's a terrific scene for both of them.
Well, Roger, I think the problem is I'm talking about two cliches. That's the problem. They're both cliches. The cop on his last day of work, and then the angry guy. Now, I mentioned two other guys.
How many cop movies have you seen that haven't dealt with a cop in this way? These are not cliches. Oh, it happens to be his last day at work. That is predictable. But who the person is, how he feels, how he behaves, how he relates to the other guy, those are not cliches.
But the center of the piece is Michael Douglas, and I cited two other guys, Peter Boyle and George C. Scott, similar kinds of roles. Both better, you agree?
I don't know. I don't necessarily think so. I think this is a very interesting performance by Michael Douglas.
No,
and I think that it gives a voice to a feeling that a lot of people in our society have.
Yeah, but of course it does. I said that, but it doesn't do it well enough. It's just about the explosion scenes, and Douglas, all he does is appear less in control than he normally does. Nothing special in the acting.
I think he shows me something here I haven't seen before, and I was happy to see it. Okay, next movie, and our next movie is The Temp. Another one of those films where you can't trust anybody because the better they seem to be, the more likely it is they're really homicidal maniacs. The movie stars Tim Hutton as an ambitious young marketing executive in a gourmet cookie company, and Lara Flynn Boyle as the temporary secretarial worker who turns up in his office one morning.
You did all this?
I was just killing time until you arrived.
Oh.
Of course, she is a marvel of efficiency who claims to care only about making her boss look better. So when an important report is late, she saves the day.
Cutting it a little close, aren't you, buddy?
Isn't there some executive ass around here you could be kissing there, Jack?
Asses I kiss don't belong to any executives. Who the hell's that?
There's an attraction between them, but then Hutton begins to get suspicious about all the terrible accidents that happen to anybody who gets in Flynn's way. He resists her come-on.
I don't get involved with my assistants.
Maybe someday I won't be your assistant.
A lot of the opening setup of the Temp is terrific, and I was looking forward to a good thriller, but then the movie completely falls apart. It's almost as if the first hour was written by a full-time screenwriter, and then they brought in a temp to finish the screenplay. The movie sets up a relationship between Hutton and his former wife, but it never follows it through. It sets him up as a paranoid with mental problems, but never delivers on the obvious story possibilities along that line. It sets up Boyle as an apparent killer, but in a plot so murky and contradictory and confusing, the movie doesn't seem to know what to make of her. And then the climax is completely inexplicable, raising so many questions. We're still asking them when the movie is over. For example, they were out in the country.
I know.
How do they get back to the bakery? How come the bakery looks like it manufactures automobiles instead of muffins?
Yeah.
What's the other woman doing there? Why doesn't he ask that question?
They've got two, I know.
Etc.
They got two good actors and giving pretty good performances. And the problem is they run them through a cornball slasher script at the end. The office situation is interesting. I think they probably made a mistake on making them cookies because that seems so comical almost. And in a serious picture, she's a good actress. They needed a better script again.
Well, you know, one of the other problems is that...
I mean, it's laughable when all these murders are going on in a cookie factory and things are so...
They can't get anybody left. Nobody can be president.
Dying.
Everybody is dead. But what I couldn't understand is why the plot couldn't make things more clear, because by the end of the film, there were all kinds of loose ends.
Very confused. Coming up next, our reaction to the surprises among this week's Oscar nominations and a review of Army of Darkness, in which a sales clerk from the 90s is thrust back into the Middle Ages.
It's got a walnut stock, cobalt blue steel, and a hair trigger. That's right. Shop smart. Shop S-Mart. I shall see you dead. Yeah.
That's Bruce Campbell as a Kmart-style sales clerk, suddenly transported back to the Middle Ages through contact with that old movie Standby, The Book of the Dead. Somebody must have made a lot of copies of that book and laid them around in creepy forests. Anyway, in the style of the Back to the Future movies, but without that series' wit, he confronts these old English types with a modern weapon. Wow, we haven't seen that before.
It's a 12-gauge double-barreled Remington. S-Mart's top of the line. You can find this in the sporting goods department.
The best moments in the movie involve a rip-off of Ray Harryhausen's stop-action animated skeletons from Jason and the Argonauts. See that instead of this picture. They're more compelling than any of the humans in this film. Only contact with the Book of the Dead can get our hero back to the 20th century, so we get a special effects game of picking book number 1, book number 2, or book number 3. Now, there's a lot wrong with Army of Darkness. The special effects, as you could see, are great, but there isn't a single interesting human being in the film. There's also very little wit, and this surprised me, no real love interest. Army of Darkness was directed by Sam Raimi, who made the action hit Darkman a couple of years ago. In that film, we cared about Darkman. Here, every man is in the dark.
Well, I'm not voting thumbs up on it, but I guess I liked it better than you. And one of the things I liked was the state-of-the-art special effects.
Oh, I liked that
There's a lot of special effects in this movie, and they're very inventive. And I think what Raimi is trying to do in this film is kind of make a naked gun approach to horror movies and medieval warfare films. But the problem is, it's not that funny because most of the funny stuff in this movie was already seen in his movie from 1987, Evil Dead 2, which this one is allegedly kind of a sequel to. And I liked Evil Dead 2 so much more that I can't recommend
But you know what I'm talking about. When he's standing among the troops, the old English troops there, they're meaningless to us.
Yeah, they are.
Bruce Campbell, he's pretty much of a stiff, I think. So really, you watch the special effects.
No, Bruce Campbell, I think, does exactly what the role calls for.
Oh, but he could have a little more personality.
Maybe so.
When we come back, Oscar surprises. We'll look at this year's Academy Award nominations with some joy, some astonishment, and a little sorrow. Look
at the 1993 Oscar nominations, which were announced Wednesday in Los Angeles, and provided us with a certain amount of pleasure and a good measure of outrage. Let's start with exclusions, deserving work that was overlooked by the Academy. Most of my outrage here is directed at the committee that nominates the best documentaries of the year and makes an annual tradition of overlooking the year's best work. Movies like Roger and Me and The Thin Blue Line were overlooked in earlier years, and this year, this dysfunctional group of myopic knee-jerkers failed to nominate Brothers Keeper, the year's most successful and best-reviewed documentary, the one documentary that had to be on the list. Were they out to lunch when they overlooked this unforgettable portrait of an elderly man indicted for the murder of his brother?
If somebody put their hands over his mouth, you'd have to have marks on him, wouldn't he? He didn't have no marks on him.
Moving on to another category, another good film that got lost in the shuffle was The Player, although Robert Altman did get a Best Director nomination for his scathing indictment of Hollywood. Tim Robbins here was thought to be a front-runner for Best Actor, but the Academy didn't think so.
You know what his motto used to be? No stars, just talent.
I was also very disappointed that Alfre Woodard didn't get nominated for her brilliant supporting performance in Passion Fish, which in every way was the counterpoint to Mary McDonnell's work, which did get nominated for the same film.
That's what I can do. Now push me back inside.
Push yourself back.
Woodard was nominated a few years ago for Cross Creek. She was great last year in Grand Canyon, but this, I think, was her best performance. And really, if you're going to honor Mary McDonnell, you have to see this as a two-handed piece. One of them couldn't have done it without the other.
The one point I want to make about The Player, which really bothered me because I had that way up on my list of the 10 best films.
Yeah.
I think that that Altman gets his nomination out of the director's branch, just a couple of hundred guys in that branch, as opposed to the 5,000 of the Academy. So they're the people, the mass of the people that didn't like it. I don't know, too sophisticated for them?
You know,
I can't believe it.
What can be done about the documentary category outside of firing them all and starting with a fresh bunch of people?
Well, you know,
how could they miss Brothers Keeper?
Unbelievable.
What were they thinking
remember Hearts of Darkness, filmmaker's Apocalypse. I thought it was the best film last year.
They have a wonderful record. Year after year, they managed to miss the documentary that they shouldn't possibly overlook.
I think that when a film gets well-reviewed and gets high-profile distribution, I think they say, it doesn't need our help, and they kick it out. They hold its excellence and success unfairly against the film.
It's the biggest of the Oscar scandals.
It's the biggest ongoing one, that's for sure. They cleaned up the music branch a little bit. They ought to clean up this one as well.
You're right.
The biggest surprise exclusions for me begin with Malcolm X. Now, I didn't expect Spike Lee to be nominated as Best Director, and he wasn't. In effect, he called the production and marketing people at Warner Brothers racist for not being more free with their money. So it doesn't surprise me they and other people in the business turned their backs on him. But that the snub would be extended to Malcolm X, the movie itself, is one of the best pictures, well, that leads me to only one conclusion. They didn't see the movie. Because everyone I've talked to who has seen it enjoyed it, particularly the big scale of the film, spanning the swing time of the 40s.
Roseland!
To Malcolm preaching on the streets of Harlem in the 50s.
Oh, I say it again, you've been had. You've been took.
And then a high point, Malcolm's journey to Mecca in the 60s. I think the LA riots kept a lot of Academy members away from embracing or even seeing this important and well-directed movie. Another surprise exclusion, Jack Lemmon and Glengarry Glen Ross. When that film came out at the end of September, not only was everyone talking about a nomination for Lemmon, but he was an early favorite to win the big prize as Best Actor for his portrayal of a sad-sack real estate con man. But Glengarry was so downbeat and failed to arouse any box office interest that Lemmon's skill and his personal popularity weren't enough to gain him a nomination. Academy voters don't nominate dark little movies. Another surprising exclusion is Rob Reiner as director of the smash hit A Few Good Men. Here I think the Academy was smart, however. He did a good, competent job, but not any better, I think, than any of a dozen or maybe 24 other directors would have done with this high-powered, talented cast.
We use words like honor, code, loyalty.
A Few Good Men was nominated for Best Picture as Popular Entertainment. I'm glad the director's branch, those small group of 200 men and a couple of women, saw Reiner's work for what it was, just a competent job, and made more exciting choices for Best Director.
You know, I really was shocked that Jack Lemmon wasn't nominated, and of course, even though you say they don't like little dark pictures, Al Pacino was not nominated for the same film. And if you had to compare the two performances, Pacino was certainly good. In fact, Everyone in that movie could have been nominated in the Best Supporting category, but Lemon, I think, gave the performance of a lifetime. He was just over the top.
You know what I think, Roger? I think that maybe that you just hit it on the head, which is that they're all supporting work.
Yeah.
He was pushed in the lead category, and he didn't have enough screen time to stand up against other more complicated roles.
You may be right about that. When we come back, more Oscar surprises from this year's list of nominees.
Surprises of inclusion, names of films and people we were surprised to see included in this year's Oscar list. And my surprises, and I'm delighted with every one of them, begins with Marissa Tomei, a wonderful new young talent, nominated as Best Supporting Actress for her comic work in My Cousin Vinny. She plays the New York girlfriend of lawyer Joe Pesci, both fish out of water in the deep south where he's trying a case.
Oh, yeah, you blend.
Another surprise nominee, David Paymer, nominated as Best Supporting Actor for his great work as Billy Crystal's long-suffering showbiz brother in Mr. Saturday Night. I pushed hard on our memo to the Academy show a couple of weeks ago for this nomination, and Oscar voters reached out to spot great work in a film that was a box office dud, and that doesn't happen very often. And my final surprise of inclusion, Robert Downey Jr. as Charlie Chaplin in Chaplin, a much derided film, but I thought it was worth seeing for Downey's remarkable performance as both the old and young Chaplin.
No, wait, hold it. Fella, keep it going. Big reaction. Who is this?
Again, the Actors Branch looked past the box office numbers. I'm glad they did for a great performance in an unfairly maligned movie.
Well, of course, that two of the three performances that you talk about were movies that went right into the sink as far as box office was concerned. And so often it seems that they limit their selections to the hits.
You bet.
And it's so important to be able to look at all of the year's movies.
Well, we wanted them to do it for years, and now they started doing it.
Okay, they're taking our advice.
Okay.
Among this year's nominees, the biggest dark horse for me was a low-budget Irish-British production named The Crying Game, which has been generating terrific word of mouth ever since it first hit the festival circuit last fall. Now it's won the brass ring with 6 nominations, including Best Picture, Director, Actor, and Supporting Actor. And by nominating Jay Davidson as Best Supporting Actor, the Academy essentially revealed a secret that millions of moviegoers have done a good job of keeping to themselves all of this time: the sexual identity of the London hairdresser who falls in love with the film's hero, played by Stephen Ray, another surprise Oscar nominee.
See that, Cole?
See what, Bill?
He gave me a look.
Did he?
Just cut his hair, you know.
Another surprise this year was Catherine Deneuve's nomination for Best Actress for Indochine. It was the role of a lifetime in a movie called The French Gone with the Wind, but foreign language performances are hardly ever nominated by the Academy, and Deneuve upset candidates like Whoopi Goldberg and Gina Davis, who were in huge box office hits. This year's nominations included another first-time surprise in the documentary category. Fires of Kuwait, an on-location documentary about the hundreds of burning oil wells left behind by retreating Iraqi troops, became the first Oscar nominee in history to be shot in the giant screen IMAX process. I like IMAX and Omnimax for the way they use enormous screens and dozens of speakers to overwhelm the audience with the film-going experience. And although I personally preferred Lessons of Darkness, the Kuwait documentary shot by Werner Herzog for the Discovery Channel, I was pleased that the IMAX and Omnimax people finally made it into Oscar's finalist circle.
Well, I'll tell you, the thing that you talk about the most, of course, The Crying Game, and let me tell you something. This could be the upsetter of the year. I mean, this is the little film that could, all it had going for itself was that it was original and fresh.
Yes,
and
it was.
People found it and passed it along, and all kinds of people, moviegoers you might not think would go to see an independent Irish-British production. They found My Left Foot, they made it a hit, they made it an Oscar winner, and I think they may do the same thing here.
You know, it's interesting you say that, because I suppose that today the front runner for Best Picture is probably Unforgiven by Clint Eastwood. But you know, more people have talked to me about The Crying Game than any movie since the original Batman. And I think there's a real groundswell there.
I think there is too. I think it's a much better film, The Unforgiven, and if the voters are listening, go for it. Make it The Crying Game.
When we come back, our video pick of the week, the funny offbeat horror spoof that inspired Army of Darkness.
Ebert's Video Pick of the Week, brought to you by Orville Redenbacher, the first and last name in popcorn.
Now it's time for our video pick of the week, and I would like to recommend a strange and funny horror satire named Evil Dead 2: Dead by Dawn. I said earlier in the program that I was disappointed by its sequel, Army of Darkness, the Sam Raimi horror spoof that has great production values but somehow seems to be recycling its comedy approach. Maybe that's because I was a fan of Raimi's 1987 movie, Evil Dead 2, which also starred the hard-working Bruce Campbell as the bloodiest self-defense artist in horror history.
Groovy.
Evil Dead 2 is not for everyone, but for horror fans, It's one of the funniest movies of recent years. I recommend you take a look at it on home video. Now let's take another look at the movies we reviewed this week. A split decision on Falling Down with Michael Douglas as an unemployed worker on a rampage. I thought it struck a nerve. Gene thought the same story had been done earlier and much better. 2 thumbs down for The Temp, a movie that disappears into an impenetrable thicket of murky plotting. 2 more thumbs down for Army of Darkness, the horror film send-up that never really takes off. And so my recommendation, go see The Crying Game.
That's it for this week. We'll be back next week with reviews of Mad Dog and Glory with mobster Bill Murray giving timid police investigator Robert De Niro a very unusual present, and Rich in Love starring Albert Finney as the head of a troubled Southern family. That's next week, and until then, the balcony is closed.
Easy Spirit walking shoes. Walking shoes for those who want to get even further away from it all. Easy Spirit, our difference is our cushioning. St. Ives Swiss Formula Peaches and Cream Facial Beauty Wash. For a peaches and cream complexion, it's St. Ives Swiss Formula naturally. Fashion Bug, 1,200 stores carrying the latest in junior, Mrs. Plus, girls, and men's fashions. 1-800-FB-FITS in the letter U. Fashion Bug fits your life. It's America's favorite jelly bean. Jelly Belly, now appearing at theaters and video stores with good taste. Jelly Belly beans, try them, you'll love them.